GPT 5.4 just dropped, and if you think it's just another ChatGPT update, you're going to miss what actually changed. I've been putting it through its paces since March 5th, and here's what nobody is saying clearly enough. This isn't a smarter chatbot. This is a model that controls your computer, reads your entire codebase in one pass, and corrects itself mid-thought, without you asking it to. I expected an incremental upgrade. What I got was something that made me rethink how I work. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what GPT 5.4 is, what changed under the hood, and more importantly, what it actually means for how you work. We're going to cover the 4 big new capabilities, run through 4 live demos, and I'll tell you straight up which pricing plan is actually worth it and which one you can skip. First up, let's talk about why this model exists at all, because the reason is more interesting than the release notes let on. The end of choosing between thinking and coding, here's a problem that every power user of ChatGPT has run into over the past year. You needed to pick a model. If you wanted serious reasoning and planning, you went with the thinking variant. If you needed elite-level coding, you went with Codex. But the moment your task touched both, say, architect a solution and write the code for it, you were stuck context switching between 2 different models, 2 different threads, 2 different experiences. That friction was real, and it slowed serious professional work down considerably. GPT 5.4 kills that problem entirely. This is a unified model, one system that merges the deep reasoning lineage of GPT 5.2 thinking with the software engineering precision of GPT 5.3 Codex. It doesn't make you choose. A single agentic workflow can now move fluidly between writing a market analysis, generating the Python to model it, and then executing that code against a live data source, without ever switching tabs or models. And the reliability improvements back this up. Compared to GPT 5.2, this model shows a 33% reduction in false claims and an 18% reduction in overall response errors. OpenAI attributes that to something they call the build, run, verify, fix loop. Basically, the model is trained to check its own work against real-world environments before it calls anything done. It's the difference between a developer who submits a pull request and a developer who actually runs the tests first. The model comes in a few variants. GPT 5.4 thinking is what Plus and Team subscribers get. It's fast, handles upfront planning well, and covers the vast majority of professional use cases. GPT 5.4 Pro is the heavy compute version, reserved for Pro and Enterprise, and it's where you go when the stakes are high. Complex legal audits, financial modeling, agentic coding at scale. There's also a mini variant for high-volume API routing where latency matters more than depth. And GPT 5.3 Instant sticks around for everyday conversational use where you just want a fast, clean response. But here's where it gets interesting. The tools they built on top of this engine are what actually change your day-to-day work. Hashtag 4 technologies that redefine what AI can do. Let's talk about the 4 pillars OpenAI is calling GPT 5.4's agentic toolkit, because each one solves a real problem that previous models couldn't handle cleanly. The first is native computer use, and this one is a big deal. Prior AI computer use implementations required brittle custom plugins or fragile API bridges. GPT 5.4 has this built in natively. The model sees a screenshot of your screen, figures out where to click or what to type, executes that action in an isolated environment, then looks at a new screenshot to verify the action worked. It loops through this over and over. On the OS World benchmark, which tests AI navigation of complex real desktop environments, GPT 5.4 scored 75%. The human baseline is 72.4%. The model is literally outperforming the average person at navigating software interfaces. We'll show you exactly what this looks like in the demo section. The second is the 1 million token context window. The standard limit for GPT 5.4 is 272,000 tokens, already massive. But the API and Codex versions support an experimental 1 million token context. To put that in perspective, GPT 5.0 supported 400,000 tokens, and that felt enormous at the time. 1 million tokens means you can feed the model an entire software repository, a multi-thousand-page legal transcript, or years of financial reports, all in a single conversation turn. It reasons across all of it simultaneously. The implications for long-horizon knowledge work are hard to overstate. Third is dynamic tool search, which is a quiet but genuinely clever architectural fix. In complex agentic pipelines, you might have 500 different tool definitions, functions the model can call to interact with external systems. Putting all 500 in the prompt upfront burns thousands of tokens and actually degrades reasoning quality. GPT-5.4 solves this with deferred loading. The model sees a lightweight index first, figures out which tool it actually needs, then fetches only the full definition for that specific function. In testing with an MCP Atlas benchmark, this reduced token usage by 47% while maintaining the same tool selection accuracy. Less bloat, same precision. And fourth is native compaction support. Long-running agent workflows generate enormous amounts of intermediate reasoning. The model's internal chain of thought can balloon to the point where it literally forgets what it was trying to accomplish. GPT-5.4 is the first mainline model trained specifically to summarize and compress its own reasoning trajectory while keeping the critical logic intact. Think of it as the model's ability to take focused notes on itself so it doesn't lose the thread on a task that runs for hours. Hashtag live demo. Mid-response steering, all right. Let's get into the demos. The first one I want to show you is mid-response steering, because it changes the dynamic of working with a thinking model in a way that feels almost obvious in retrospect, but nobody had done it cleanly before. Here's the scenario. I'm going to ask GPT 5.4 thinking for a market entry strategy for solar in India. Before it writes a single word of the actual answer, it shows me its upfront plan. It's going to search 2024 solar policy, analyze the top 5 vendors, and draft a 5-year ROI model. I can see exactly what it intends to do. Now here's where the steering comes in. Midway through its vendor analysis step, I notice it's pulling in industrial scale suppliers, but I actually only care about residential solar. In older models, I'd have to let it finish, then restart with a corrected prompt and burn another full turn. With GPT 5.4, I click the steer button and say, focus only on residential solar, ignore industrial vendors. The model pivots in real time. The final output restructures around residential data without starting a new chat. In practice, this kind of course correction cuts back and forth turns by roughly 40%. Hashtag native computer use for browser automation. The second demo is the one that will probably make you stop and stare at your screen for a moment. The prompt: go to 50 supplier websites, find the price for a 500-watt inverter, and build a comparison spreadsheet in Excel. Watch what happens. The model takes a screenshot of a supplier's website, calculates the pixel coordinates for the price field, navigates menus, handles cookie pop-ups, extracts the data, moves to the next site. Over and over. When it hits a 404 error on one supplier, it doesn't stop. It automatically searches for a backup supplier and continues. The build, run, verify, fix loop is visible in the API console on the left side of the screen. The model catching its own errors and self-correcting without any human intervention. What used to take a junior analyst half a day of copy-pasting now happens while you get coffee. That's not an exaggeration. That's just what this capability actually does. Hashtag how to actually steer this model. Now, let's talk about how to get the most out of GPT 5.4, because this model responds to active steering in a way that earlier models really didn't. The most important parameter to understand is reasoning_effort. This controls how many reasoning tokens the model generates before it answers, essentially, how deeply it thinks. Set it to low and you get fast, cost-efficient responses good for routine summarization or classification. Set it to medium and you get the balanced default for everyday professional work. Set it to high or X high and the model explores multiple logical paths, verifies its own assumptions, and is substantially less likely to miss something on complex tasks. For code audits, scientific analysis, and financial modeling, always run high. For quick question-answer workflows, low keeps costs manageable. Alongside reasoning effort, there's verbosity control, a granular setting for how much the model writes. Low verbosity gives you code-only outputs with minimal commentary, ideal for embedded agents and rapid debugging loops. High verbosity generates structured, cited, step-by-step explanations, which is what you want for documentation, audits, and educational outputs. The third technique is what OpenAI calls output contracts. Essentially, you define exactly what a successful response looks like inside the prompt itself. Specify the output format, JSON, XML, Markdown. The grounding rules: use only the provided documents, do not hallucinate sources, and the completion criteria: what does done actually mean for this task? Contracts reduce prompt ambiguity and dramatically improve consistency on repeated agentic workflows. If you're building anything that runs GPT-5.4 in a pipeline, output contracts are non-negotiable. Hashtag pricing. Let's be straight about the money, because there's a version of this that makes sense for you and a version that probably doesn't. The Plus plan at $20 per month gets you access to GPT-5.4 Thinking, the main model, with an 80-message limit per 3 hours. For individuals doing research, writing, and general professional work, this is the correct entry point. The Pro plan at $200 per month is a different product. You get the full GPT 5.4 Pro model with maximum reasoning compute, the 1 million token context window, and a dedicated GPU allocation. If you're doing complex financial modeling, legal analysis, or running the kind of multi-file engineering work we just demoed, the Pro plan is where that capability lives. For individuals, $200 is a meaningful number, and it's only worth it if you're regularly hitting the kinds of tasks that actually require pro-level compute. On the API side, standard pricing is $2.50 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens. If you go above the 272,000 token standard limit into the experimental million token range, those costs roughly double to account for the exponential complexity of long context attention. Plan your workflows accordingly if you're operating at that scale regularly. Hashtag security and what you should know before you deploy. One thing worth flagging, and this matters especially if you're building agentic workflows for professional environments. GPT 5.4's increased agency comes with a more robust security layer that OpenAI is calling the expanded cyber safety stack. The key mechanism is asynchronous blocking. When the model encounters a request involving sensitive system files or potentially harmful software operations, its reasoning process pauses while a secondary security model audits the intended action before it executes. For enterprise deployments, this is paired with zero data retention. Screenshots of internal software and proprietary codebases are not stored or used for training. On the developer side, OpenAI mandates isolated virtualization for any native computer use deployment. The model should operate in a sandboxed browser or VM that cannot access the host machine's file system or environment variables. For high-impact actions like financial transactions or deleting cloud resources, a human-in-the-loop consent step is required. And the allowed_tools parameter in the API lets you hard limit which functions the model can actually call, which is your primary defense against agent drift on long-horizon tasks. Here's the bottom line on GPT 5.4. This isn't an incremental update. The chatbot era, where AI was a very clever text box, is over. What OpenAI shipped on March 5th is a system that operates software, holds entire codebases in memory, and performs professional knowledge work at an 83% success rate across 44 occupations. That number, from the GDeepFile benchmark, means that in more than 4 out of 5 real professional tasks, this model matches or exceeds someone with 5 to 10 years of industry experience. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to get ahead of it. The people who learn to steer these systems, who understand reasoning effort, output contracts, and when to deploy native computer use versus when to just ask a question, are going to have a genuine leverage advantage over the ones who don't. If you've got questions about which plan fits your workflow, or you want to see any of these demos extended in more depth, drop them in the comments. I read everything. And if you found this useful, the subscribe button genuinely helps. It tells the algorithm this kind of detailed breakdown is worth surfacing. I'll see you in the next one.